The flames licked higher against the darkening sky, orange tongues devouring what had once been a modest homestead. Catherine Mills stood with her wrists bound behind her back, rough hemp cutting into her skin. Her 8-year-old daughter Emma pressed against her side, small body trembling despite the heat radiating from their burning home. "Please," Catherine's voice cracked, raw from smoke and desperation. "Please, take my daughter away before they burn her too." The 3 men circling them laughed. The tallest, a scarred brute named Harlan, spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "Should have thought about that before your husband crossed us. Woman." "He's been dead 2 years, Catherine said, tasting ash on her lips. "Whatever debt you think we owe—" "Debt don't die with the debtor." Harlan's companion, a wiry man with yellowed teeth, kicked at a burning timber that had fallen from the porch. Sparks scattered like fireflies. "Your man stole cattle from Mr. Morrison. We're here to collect—" Catherine had heard this story before. Her late husband James accused of rustling, though he'd been an honest man who'd worked himself into an early grave trying to scratch a living from this unforgiving land. But truth meant nothing to men like these, hired guns who used any excuse to terrorize widows and orphans. Emma whimpered, burying her face in Catherine's skirts. The child hadn't spoken since the men had dragged them from their beds an hour ago, hadn't made a sound as they'd ransacked the house before setting it ablaze. Catherine's heart broke a little more with each shallow breath her daughter took. The 3rd man, younger than the others with nervous eyes, shifted his weight. "Harlan, maybe we should—" "Shut your mouth, boy." Harlan drew his revolver, the metal gleaming in the firelight. "Morrison wants a message sent. Can't have folks thinking they can steal from him and leave their kin unpunished." Catherine closed her eyes, pulling Emma closer. She thought of her husband's grave on the hillside, marked with a simple wooden cross. Soon they'd join him. At least Emma wouldn't have to grow up in this cruel world. Wouldn't have to— The sharp crack of a rifle split the night. Harlan's revolver flew from his hand, spinning into the darkness. He cursed, clutching his wrist. Another shot, the wiry man's hat sailed off his head. The younger one dropped to his knees, hands raised. From the shadows beyond the firelight emerged a figure on horseback. The rider moved with deliberate slowness, rifle balanced across his saddle. As he entered the circle of light, Catherine glimpsed weathered features beneath a wide-brimmed hat, a face carved by wind and sun into something hard as granite. The stranger said nothing. His horse, a dusty bay, snorted and pawed the ground. Harlan recovered first, reaching for the gun at his hip with his left hand. The rifle swung toward him, steady as stone. The scarred man froze. 3 against 1, Harlan said, though his voice had lost its earlier swagger. "You best ride on, mister." The stranger's eyes moved from man to man, taking their measure. Still, he didn't speak. The silence stretched, broken only by the crackle of flames and Emma's hiccuping breaths. The younger gunman broke first. "I didn't sign up for killing women and children anyway." He scrambled to his feet, backing toward the horses. "I'm done. Get back here, you yellow—" Harlan's curse died as the rifle barrel shifted slightly in his direction. The wiry man looked between Harlan and the silent rider. Something in the stranger's stillness, the absolute certainty of his posture, made the decision for him. "Kid's right. This ain't worth dying for." He followed the younger man, both of them mounting up and spurring their horses into the darkness. Harlan stood alone now, fists clenched. "You think you've won something here? Morrison's got a dozen more men. They'll come looking." The stranger finally moved, dismounting in one fluid motion. He walked past Harlan as if the man didn't exist, approaching Catherine and Emma. Up close, she could see his eyes were gray as winter sky, set in a face that might have been handsome once before the land had marked it. He drew a knife from his belt. Catherine instinctively turned to shield Emma, but the blade only whispered through the ropes binding her wrists. They fell away, and blood rushed painfully back into her hands. "You can't just—" Harlan started forward, then stopped as the stranger turned to face him. For a moment, Catherine thought there would be more violence. The stranger's hand rested on his sidearm, not threatening but ready. Harlan's face worked through rage, calculation, and finally something like fear. "This ain't over," Harlan said, but he was already backing toward his horse. "Morrison, don't forget." The stranger watched him mount and ride off, waited until the hoofbeats faded into nothing. Only then did he turn back to Catherine and Emma. He gestured to his horse, then to the burning house, and finally, to the horizon. The message was clear. They couldn't stay here. Catherine's legs nearly buckled. Everything they owned was turning to ash. James's books, Emma's rag doll, the quilt her mother had made. But they were alive. This silent stranger had given them that. "Emma," she whispered, kneeling to cup her daughter's soot-streaked face. "We have to go with this man." Emma's brown eyes, so like her father's, searched the stranger's face. Whatever she saw there must have reassured her because she nodded. A tiny movement. The stranger lifted Emma onto his horse as if she weighed nothing, then helped Catherine mount behind her. He walked alongside, leading them away from the flames. Catherine looked back once at the skeletal remains of her home silhouetted against the night sky, then forward into the darkness. She didn't know this man's name, didn't know why he'd intervened or where he was taking them, but the steady rhythm of his steps, the careful way he guided the horse around obstacles, the protective angle of his body between them and any potential threat, all of it spoke louder than words. They traveled through the night, the stranger never mounting, never rushing. When Emma dozed against her mother's chest, he adjusted his pace to keep the ride smooth. When Catherine swayed with exhaustion, his hand briefly touched the horse's neck, steadying the animal. As dawn pearled the eastern sky, they created a rise. Below, nestled in a valley between rolling hills, sat a cabin with smoke rising from its chimney. It wasn't much, rough-hewn logs, a small barn, a well, but it looked solid, safe. The stranger paused, looking back at them for the first time in hours. Catherine met his gaze, seeing in it not pity or desire or any of the things she'd feared, but simply acknowledgement. He'd pulled them from the fire. Now came whatever was next. "Thank you," she said. The first words between them since he'd cut her bonds. He nodded once, then continued down the slope toward the cabin, toward shelter, toward a future Catherine couldn't yet imagine. Behind them, the sun rose over the grasslands, painting the world in shades of gold and possibility. The prairie stretched endlessly before them, grass rippling like a golden sea under the morning wind. Catherine had never felt so small, so exposed. Every hoofbeat seemed to echo in the vast silence, marking their passage through a world that suddenly felt too large, too empty. The stranger walked ahead, his boots raising small puffs of dust. He hadn't spoken since they'd left the ruins of her home. Hadn't even told them his name. Catherine found herself studying the set of his shoulders, the weathered leather of his coat, the way he moved with economy and purpose. Who was this man who'd appeared from nowhere to save them? Emma stirred against her chest, mumbling something in her sleep. Catherine smoothed her daughter's tangled hair, feeling the grit of ash still clinging to the strands. They both reeked of smoke, their clothes singed and filthy. She wondered if they'd ever feel clean again. The sun climbed higher, its heat adding to their misery. Catherine's throat burned with thirst, but she wouldn't ask. Wouldn't be more of a burden than they already were. The stranger had risked his life for them. She wouldn't repay that with complaints. As if reading her thoughts, he stopped beside a small creek cutting through the grassland. He gestured for them to dismount, then led the horse to drink. Catherine helped Emma down, her own legs unsteady after hours in the saddle. "Mama, I'm thirsty," Emma whispered, the first words she'd spoken since the fire. "I know, sweetheart." Catherine knelt by the creek, cupping water in her hands for Emma to drink. The water was cool, sweet, washing away the taste of smoke and fear. The stranger had moved upstream, giving them privacy. Catherine watched him crouch by the water, removing his hat to splash his face. without the shadow of the brim. She could see he was younger than she'd thought. Perhaps 35, only a few years older than herself. His hair was dark, sun-streaked, needing a cut. He must have felt her gaze because he looked up, their eyes meeting across the distance. Catherine flushed and looked away, focusing on helping Emma wash her face and hands. They were dependent on this man's charity, nothing more. She couldn't afford to read anything into his kindness. They rested in the shade of a lone cottonwood for perhaps 20 minutes. The stranger produced hardtack and dried beef from his saddlebags, sharing it without ceremony. Emma nibbled at the tough biscuit, her appetite still suppressed by shock. Catherine forced herself to eat, knowing she needed strength for whatever lay ahead. The journey resumed, the landscape unchanging. Hours blurred together, the creak of leather, the whisper of grass, the distant cry of a hawk. The stranger's silence began to feel like a weight, pressing down on Catherine's shoulders. She'd grown up with chatty folks. Her late husband had been a talker. Even Emma usually chattered like a magpie. This quiet felt unnatural. Yet there was something else in it too, a strange comfort. He demanded nothing from them. No gratitude, no explanation, no conversation. He simply led them on, steady and sure, as if rescuing women from burning homesteads was an everyday occurrence. Late afternoon brought them to the crest of a low hill. The stranger paused, and Catherine saw why. Below lay a small valley, sheltered and green, with the cabin she'd glimpsed at dawn nestled at its heart. A thread of smoke still rose from the chimney. Someone was home. No, not someone. As they descended, a dog emerged from behind the cabin, tail wagging, a yellow mongrel, tongue lolling in a friendly grin. The stranger's hand dropped to ruffle the dog's ears, the first gesture of affection Catherine had seen from him. The cabin was small but well built, logs tightly chinked, roof sound. A vegetable garden struggled against the prairie wind, protected by a rough fence. The barn stood open, revealing a milk cow and a few chickens scratching in the dirt. It was a bachelor's establishment, functional but lacking a woman's touch. The stranger helped them dismount, then led his horse to the barn. Catherine stood uncertainly in the yard. Emma pressed against her side. What now? Were they guests? Burdens? She didn't even know what to call him. He emerged from the barn and gestured toward the cabin. Catherine understood. They should go inside. The door opened on leather hinges, revealing a single room that served as kitchen, parlor, and bedroom combined. It was clean, Spartan, everything in its place. A narrow bed stood against one wall, a table and 2 chairs by the window, a cook stove in the corner. Emma immediately noticed the bookshelf. "Mama, look, books!" For a moment, excitement broke through her trauma. Catherine glanced at the stranger, who nodded permission. Emma approached the shelf reverently, running her fingers along the spines. Her father had taught her to read, one of his gifts to her before the lung fever took him. The stranger moved to the stove, building up the fire with practiced efficiency. He filled a pot with water from a bucket, set it to heat. Catherine realized he was preparing a bath for them. The simple kindness of it made her eyes burn with unshed tears. While they waited for the water to heat, he gathered items from around the cabin, a worn but clean shirt, a pair of trousers that might have belonged to a younger, smaller man, a dress that made Catherine's breath catch. It was simple calico, faded blue, carefully folded in a trunk by the bed, a woman's dress. He set these on the table without explanation, then collected soap, towels, a comb. When the water was ready, he poured it into a wooden tub he'd dragged from behind the cabin. All of this accomplished in silence, with an efficiency that spoke of long practice at solitary living. He headed for the door, clearly intending to give them privacy. Catherine found her voice. "Wait, please." He paused, looking back. "Your name," she said. "I should know the name of the man who saved us." He studied her for a moment, as if weighing whether even this much personal information was wise to share. Finally, he spoke, his voice rough from disuse. Sam McKean." Then he was gone, closing the door gently behind him. Catherine helped Emma bathe first, scrubbing away soot and dirt and fear. The little girl was too thin, all knobby elbows and sharp shoulder blades. How would Catherine feed her now, with no home, no money, nothing but the scorched clothes on their backs? She pushed the worry aside, focusing on the present moment. Clean water, soap, safety. They were alive. Everything else could wait. When it was her turn to bathe, Catherine sank into the tepid water with a sigh. Through the window, she could see Sam. She could think of him by name now, working in the garden, the dog at his heels. He moved with the same unhurried purpose he'd shown all day, as if their presence changed nothing in his routine. The dress fit reasonably well, only a little loose through the shoulders. Catherine tried not to think about who it had belonged to, why it was here, a sister, a wife. The cabin held no other feminine touches, no photographs or mementos. Whatever woman had worn this dress was gone, leaving only questions, clean and dressed. They emerged to find Sam had returned. He'd set the table with 3 plates, 3 cups, a pot of beans bubbled on the stove, cornbread warming beside it. Simple fare, but Catherine's stomach growled at the smell. They ate in silence, broken only by the clink of spoons on tin plates. Emma kept stealing glances at Sam, curiosity warring with lingering fear. He seemed aware of her attention but didn't acknowledge it, focusing on his meal with the same steady concentration he brought to everything. As shadows lengthened outside, the question Catherine had been dreading arose. Where would they sleep? The cabin had only 1 bed, clearly Sam's. She wouldn't displace him, but neither could she expect Emma to sleep on the floor after everything she'd endured. Sam solved the problem with his usual practical efficiency. He gathered blankets from a chest, creating a pallet near the stove where the warmth would linger. For himself, he took a single blanket and headed for the door. "You're not sleeping outside," Catherine protested. He paused, looking back. His eyes held something she couldn't read, patience, perhaps, or resignation. "Barn's warm enough," he said, his voice still rough, unfamiliar. "Done it before." Before she could argue further, he was gone. Through the window, she watched him cross to the barn, the dog trotting behind. The door closed, and they were alone. Catherine tucked Emma into the bed, smoothing the quilts around her. "Are we safe here, Mama?" Emma whispered. "Yes," Catherine said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "Yes, sweetheart, we're safe." Emma's eyes drooped, exhaustion finally claiming her. Catherine sat beside her, watching her daughter sleep, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of this new place, wind in the eaves, the cow lowing softly, the distant yip of coyotes. She thought of Sam McKean in his barn, giving up his home to strangers. His silence no longer seemed oppressive, but rather a kind of grace, asking nothing, offering what he could. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, decisions to make, a future to somehow build from ashes. But tonight, they had shelter, they had safety, they had the protection of a man who spoke with actions rather than words. Catherine finally allowed her own eyes to close, one hand resting on Emma's hair. Outside, the vast prairie night stretched endlessly, full of dangers and uncertainties. Inside, for now, there was peace. Catherine woke to unfamiliar sounds, the crow of a rooster, the gentle cluck of chickens, the steady chop of an axe on wood. For a moment, panic seized her. Where was she? Then memory flooded back. The fire, the silent rescuer, this cabin that wasn't home. Emma still slept, curled into a ball beneath the quilts, in the morning light filtering through the window. Her daughter's face looked peaceful, the terror of the previous night smoothed away by sleep. Catherine rose quietly, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders, another item that had belonged to someone else, someone gone. Through the window, she could see Sam splitting logs near the woodpile. His movements were rhythmic, efficient, the axe rising and falling with mechanical precision. The yellow dog lay nearby, tail occasionally thumping the dirt. It was a scene of such ordinary domesticity that Catherine's chest tightened. This wasn't their life. They were intruders here. She found the water bucket empty and decided to make herself useful. The well stood 20 yards from the cabin, a simple affair with a windlass and rope. Catherine had drawn water countless times before, but her hands shook as she lowered the bucket. Everything felt different now. Wrong. Displaced. Like wearing another woman's dress. The bucket came up full, but as she tried to lift it from the well's edge, her trembling hands lost their grip. The bucket tipped, water spilling across her borrowed dress and bare feet. The waste of it, the simple failure of a task she'd done since childhood, broke something inside her. She sank to her knees beside the well, shoulders shaking with the silent sobs. James was gone. Their home was ash. She had nothing to offer Emma but uncertainty and dependence on a stranger's charity. What kind of mother couldn't even draw water properly? A shadow fell across her. Sam stood there, the axe hanging loose in one hand. He didn't speak, didn't touch her, just waited. When her sobs quieted, he set down the axe and lowered the bucket again, drawing it up full. He set it aside, then offered his hand. Catherine stared at that calloused palm for a long moment before accepting the help up. His grip was firm, careful, released the moment she was steady. He picked up the bucket and carried it to the cabin, Catherine trailing behind. No words of comfort, no platitudes. Just the simple act of finishing what she couldn't. Inside. Emma had awakened. She sat up in bed, eyes wide and wary. "Mama?" "I'm here, sweetheart." Catherine smoothed her dress, trying to compose herself. "Are you hungry?" Sam was already at the stove, building up the fire. He moved around the kitchen space with the same quiet efficiency, setting out flour, lard, a precious small pot of jam. Catherine watched him work, noting how he kept his movements small, unthreatening, never coming too close to Emma. "I can cook," Catherine said. "You don't need to." He glanced at her, something almost like amusement in his gray eyes. But he stepped aside, gesturing to the supplies. Catherine took his place at the stove, grateful for something familiar to do. Her hands steadied as she mixed biscuit dough, the routine of it soothing. Emma slipped from the bed, drawn by the smell of cooking. The yellow dog had followed Sam inside, and Emma's face lit up at the sight. She looked between the animal and Sam, a question in her eyes. "His name's Duke," Sam said, the words coming slow, rusty. "He's friendly." It was the longest sentence he'd spoken, offered to a child who needed comfort. Emma approached the dog carefully, hand extended. Duke's tail wagged harder, and soon Emma was kneeling beside him, burying her face in his fur. The simple joy of it made Catherine's eyes burn again. They ate breakfast mostly in silence, though Emma whispered to Duke, sharing bits of biscuit when she thought the adults weren't looking. Sam didn't object. When the meal was done, he rose and headed for the door, then paused, looking back at Catherine. "Town's 5 miles east," he said. "If you need anything." Then he was gone, back to his chores. Catherine understood the unspoken message. They could leave if they wanted. He wouldn't keep them here. The morning stretched ahead, empty and daunting. Catherine washed the dishes, made the bed, swept the already clean floor. Busy work, avoiding the larger questions. Where would they go? How would they live? She had no family left. James's relatives back east had never approved of the marriage, and she had no money for traveling anyway. Emma found solace in the books, carefully turning pages as she read aloud to Duke. Her voice, soft and hesitant at first, grew stronger as the dog proved an attentive audience. Catherine recognized the story, one of Aesop's fables. The familiar words in this unfamiliar place made her heart ache. Around midday, she ventured outside. Sam was working on the fence around the garden, replacing a rotted post. She approached hesitantly, aware of crossing into his space. "I need to earn our keep," she said without preamble. "I can cook, clean, mend. I know some doctoring. Help the midwife back home. I can work." He straightened, studying her. Sweat had darkened his shirt. Dirt streaked his hands. "No need," he said finally. There is need. Catherine lifted her chin. I won't be charity. My daughter and I, we're not beggars. Something shifted in his expression. Perhaps respect. He nodded toward the garden. Rabbits keep getting in. Beans won't make it without better protection. It wasn't much, but it was something. Catherine spent the afternoon helping reinforce the fence, weaving branches between the posts to close gaps. Her hands, soft from indoor work, quickly developed blisters. She welcomed the pain. It felt real, earned. Emma joined them, Duke at her heels. She gathered sticks, sorted them by size with the serious concentration of a child given an important task. Sam showed her which branches worked best, his patience endless. When Emma smiled, the first real smile since the fire, Catherine saw something flicker across his weathered features. Not quite a smile in return, but a softening. As the sun lowered, they went inside. Catherine insisted on preparing supper, though her blistered hands made her clumsy. Sam disappeared briefly, returning with a tin of salve. He set it on the table without comment, but Catherine understood. She'd hurt herself doing work he'd asked for. He took responsibility for that. After Emma was asleep, Catherine found herself alone with Sam for the first time. He sat at the table, mending a piece of harness by lamplight. She took the other chair, unsure whether her presence was welcome, but unwilling to hide in bed like a child. The dress, she said quietly. Who did it belong to? His hand stilled on the leather. For so long he didn't answer that Catherine thought he wouldn't. Then, my sister, Mary, died 3 winters back, lung fever. I'm sorry. He resumed working. She would have wanted someone to use it. Catherine thought of the careful way he'd kept Mary's things, folded and waiting. A man who honored memory, who didn't discard the past easily. It made their presence here feel both more intrusive and more sacred. Those men, she ventured. They said James, my husband, stole cattle. He was a good man, honest, but Morrison owns half the county, and when James refused to sell our land for less than it was worth. She trailed off, the story too familiar, too painful. Morrison, Sam's voice held something dark. Know of him. They'll come here, once they learn where we are. Let them come. The quiet certainty in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, Catherine felt something ease in her chest. This man who'd faced down 3 gunmen for strangers wouldn't flinch from trouble. Duke suddenly lifted his head, ears pricked. Sam rose smoothly, hand moving to the rifle by the door, but the dog's tail began to wag, and a moment later they heard the slow clop of hooves. Sam relaxed fractionally but kept the rifle ready. A voice called from the darkness. Sam McKean, it's Doc Summers. Heard you had visitors. Sam opened the door. An elderly man on a gray mare sat in the yard, medical bag visible in his saddlebag. His keen eyes took in Catherine, then moved to Sam. Mrs. Patterson saw smoke from your chimney this morning. Doc Summers said, got worried you were sick, cooking for yourself midday. His gaze returned to Catherine, kind but assessing. Ma'am, this is Mrs. Mills, Sam said. Her daughter's sleeping. Mills. The doctor's expression shifted. From the Broken Creek settlement? Heard there was trouble out that way. Fire, Catherine said simply. We lost everything. I see. Doc Summers dismounted, movements careful with age. Well, best check you both over. Smoke can damage the lungs, and burns aren't always obvious at first. Sam stepped aside to let him in. The examination was brief but thorough. The doctor's manner professional and gentle. He checked Emma without waking her, pronounced them both remarkably unharmed, and left the salve for Catherine's hands along with instructions for treatment. As he prepared to leave, he pulled Sam aside. Catherine couldn't hear the words, but she saw Sam's jaw tighten, saw him shake his head once, firmly. The doctor sighed, patted Sam's shoulder, and took his leave. He wanted to know if we needed anything. Catherine guessed once they were alone again. Sam nodded. And you said no. Said we were fine. The word hung between them. Unexpected. Catherine wondered if he'd meant it or if it had simply slipped out. Either way, it warmed her more than the stove's heat. Later, as Sam prepared to head to the barn again, Catherine touched his arm. He froze, looking down at her hand as if it were something foreign. "Thank you," she said. "For everything. For the doctor, the salve, for giving us time to figure out what comes next." He met her eyes then, and she saw in them a loneliness that matched her own. How long had he lived here alone with his sister's ghost and his silence? How many nights had he sat at this table, mending harness with no one to talk to but a dog? "Stay as long as you need," he said, and she heard what he didn't say. Stay. Just stay. He left for the barn, Duke padding after him. Catherine banked the fire and lay down beside Emma, her daughter's warm presence a comfort in the dark. Outside, wind rattled the windows, carrying the scent of coming rain. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Morrison's men might come. She needed to find a way forward for herself and Emma. But tonight, she allowed herself to feel something she hadn't expected, the possibility of belonging somewhere again. Not the home she'd lost, but something new, built on silence and small kindnesses and the steadfast presence of a man who asked for nothing but gave what he could. The first time Catherine ventured into town, she felt the weight of every stare, perched on the wagon seat beside Sam, with Emma tucked between them. She kept her spine straight despite the whispers that followed their progress down Main Street. Sam had business at the feed store, and Catherine needed supplies they couldn't produce at the cabin: salt, coffee, thread for mending. "Look at that," a woman's voice carried from the millinery shop doorway. "Sam McKean's taken in strays." Her companion, a pinch-faced matron in black bombazine, sniffed audibly. "The Mills woman. Heard her house burned down. Suspicious, if you ask me. A decent woman alone, middle of the night." Catherine's cheeks burned, but she kept her eyes forward. Beside her, Sam's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Emma pressed closer to her mother's side, sensing the hostility even if she didn't understand it. "At the general store. Mr. Garrett greeted them with professional courtesy that didn't quite mask his curiosity. "Sam, ma'am." His eyes lingered on Catherine's borrowed dress, on Emma's too thin frame. "Heard you had some trouble out at Broken Creek." "Fire," Sam said shortly, placing his order on the counter. "Need these supplies?" Of course. Garrett bustled about, filling the order, but Catherine caught him exchanging glances with other customers. A story was being written here, one where she was either victim or villain, but certainly not respectable. While Sam handled the purchases, Catherine noticed a posted bill on the wall. "Seamstress wanted," it read. "Apply at Mrs. Henderson's dress shop." Hope flared in her chest. She could sew, had made most of her and Emma's clothes before the fire. It would be a way to earn money, to not be dependent on Sam's charity. "You interested in that position?" Catherine turned to find a well-dressed woman studying her. Mrs. Henderson herself, judging by the quality of her clothes and the proprietary way she stood. "Yes, ma'am," Catherine said. "I have experience. I'm sure you do." Mrs. Henderson's smile was cold. "But I run a respectable establishment. I can't have questionable women working for me. You understand?" The rejection stung more for being delivered so politely. Catherine understood perfectly. A widow living with an unmarried man, no matter how innocent the arrangement, was scandal enough to taint any business that employed her. "I understand," Catherine managed, voice steady despite the shame burning in her throat. Sam appeared at her elbow, arms full of packages. He looked between Catherine and Mrs. Henderson, reading the situation with that uncanny perception he had. Without a word, he guided Catherine toward the door, Emma trailing behind. Outside, loading the wagon, he finally spoke. "Don't need their work anyway." "Yes, we do," Catherine said quietly. "I can't live on your charity forever, and Emma needs things. Clothes, shoes for winter, schooling." "Got money enough," he interrupted. "Ranch does well. That's not the point." Catherine's frustration spilled over. Don't you see what they think? What they're saying about us? About me? He finished securing the load, then turned to face her. Let them talk. Easy for you to say. You're a man. Your reputation. My reputation? For the first time, she heard something like anger in his voice. You think they respect me, the man who keeps to himself, who buried his sister alone because the minister wouldn't come out for a fever death. They tolerate me because I pay my bills and don't cause trouble. Nothing more. The revelation silenced her. She'd assumed his isolation was choice, not circumstance. Now she saw it differently. Two outcasts finding shelter together, united by their exclusion from polite society. The ride home was quiet, but it was a different kind of silence than before. When they passed the schoolhouse, Emma perked up, watching the children playing in the yard with longing eyes. Another problem to solve: how to get Emma an education when the town already viewed them as pariahs. Over the following days, more neighbors made their opinions known. Mrs. Patterson, the woman who'd sent Doc Summers, arrived with a basket of preserves and a hefty dose of disapproval. It's not proper, she announced, settling her bulk at Catherine's table. Sam had made himself scarce at her arrival. A young widow, a bachelor. People will talk. People are already talking, Catherine said, serving tea she could ill afford to share. All the more reason to make other arrangements. Mrs. Patterson leaned forward, voice dropping confidentially. The church runs a home for widows and orphans in Dodge City. Basic, but respectable. I could write you a letter of introduction. We're fine here, Catherine interrupted. Fine? The older woman's eyebrows rose. Child, you're living in sin, whether you share his bed or not. Think of your daughter. What kind of example? The example of a man who saved our lives, Catherine said, voice sharp. Who asks nothing of us? Who sleeps in his own barn to protect our reputation? Where was the church when those men burned our home? Where were all these concerned neighbors then? Mrs. Patterson gathered herself up, offended. I came here trying to help. No, you came here trying to make yourself feel righteous by saving the fallen woman. We don't need saving, Mrs. Patterson. We need to be left in peace. After the woman left in a huff, Catherine found her hands shaking. She'd just alienated one of the few neighbors who'd shown any kindness, but the anger felt clean, necessary. She was tired of being seen as a problem to be solved rather than a person deserving dignity. Sam returned from wherever he'd been hiding, Duke at his heels. He surveyed the barely touched preserves, the teacups. She gone? Probably forever. Catherine said, I was rude. Something that might have been approval flickered in his eyes. Good. That evening, a rider approached the cabin. Sam was instantly alert, rifle in hand, but the man raised both hands peacefully. It was Thomas Morrison himself, the cattle baron whose hired guns had burned Catherine's home. Morrison was everything Sam wasn't, smooth, well-spoken, dressed in expensive cloth and polished boots. He dismounted with casual confidence. As if he owned the ground he walked on, which, in a sense, he did. His ranch sprawled across half the county. Mr. McKean. Morrison touched his hat brim. Mrs. Mills, I heard you'd taken shelter here. State your business, Sam said, rifle still ready though not directly pointed. Now. No need for hostility. Morrison's smile was practiced. False. I came to make amends. There was a misunderstanding with some of my men. They exceeded their authority. I've dismissed them. Of course. Catherine felt Emma trembling behind her skirts. Those men had tried to kill them on Morrison's orders, and now he stood here pretending regret. I'd like to compensate you for your losses, Morrison continued, pulling out a leather wallet. Shall we say $50? For the inconvenience? Our home, Catherine said, voice low. You burned our home, everything we owned. My husband's grave is on that land. Unfortunate. Morrison agreed, though his eyes remained cold. But dwelling on the past helps no one. Take the money. Mrs. Mills, start fresh somewhere else. Somewhere more suitable. The threat was subtle but clear. Leave the area, or face more misunderstandings. "The lady's not interested," Sam said. Morrison's genial mask slipped. "I wasn't aware I was addressing you. McKean, this is between Mrs. Mills and myself." "No," Sam said simply. "It's not." The two men stared at each other, tension crackling between them. Morrison was younger, probably faster, certainly more ruthless. But Sam stood on his own land, defending his own, and that counted for something. Finally. Morrison stepped back. "I see. Well, the offer stands. Mrs. Mills, but not indefinitely. And McKean." His smile turned predatory. "You might want to consider your own position. A man alone, so far from town. Accidents happen." "They do," Sam agreed calmly. "Like what happened to your men. 3 against 1. And they ran. Word gets around." Morrison's face darkened. He mounted his horse with less grace than he dismounted. "This isn't over." "Never thought it was," Sam replied. They watched Morrison ride away, dust rising in his wake. Catherine realized she was shaking, from anger more than fear. "He'll be back, probably," Sam agreed. "Doesn't that worry you?" He looked at her then, really looked at her. "Been alone a long time," he said slowly. Never had much worth protecting before. The implication hung between them, that she and Emma had become something worth protecting. Catherine didn't know how to respond to that, so she didn't. Instead, she went inside to start supper, leaving Sam standing guard in the yard. That night, for the first time, Sam didn't go to the barn. He spread his bedroll by the door, rifle within reach. "Just for tonight," he said when Catherine protested. "Till we see what Morrison does." But they all knew it wasn't just for tonight. Lines had been drawn. The town might whisper about propriety, but real danger had shown itself. In the face of that, reputation seemed a small concern. Emma, who'd been silent through Morrison's visit, finally spoke as Catherine tucked her in. "Are we going to have to run again, Mama?" Catherine smoothed her daughter's hair. "No, sweetheart, Mr. Sam won't let anything happen to us. You promise?" Catherine glanced at Sam, a silent guardian by the door. His presence filled the cabin, solid and reassuring. Whatever the town thought, whatever Morrison threatened, this man would stand between them and harm. "I promise," she said, and for the first time since the fire, she meant it. The days settled into a rhythm that Catherine found both foreign and comforting. She woke each morning to Sam's quiet movements as he built up the fire, then slipped outside to tend the animals before she and Emma stirred. By the time they dressed and emerged, fresh milk would be waiting on the table, eggs gathered, the early chores done. Catherine learned to match his efficiency with her own. While he worked the fields, she transformed the bachelor cabin bit by bit, not with frills or feminine touches that might make him uncomfortable, but with simple improvements. She mended the torn curtains, scrubbed years of soot from the windows until they sparkled, organized the shelves with quiet precision. The cabin remained sparse, masculine, but cleaner, more welcoming. Emma adapted with the resilience of childhood. She followed Duke everywhere, collected eggs with solemn responsibility, and helped Catherine in the garden. The books on Sam's shelf became her treasures, read and reread until she could recite passages from memory. Sometimes Catherine caught Sam watching Emma read, something soft in his expression before he turned away. The work was hard but satisfying. Catherine's hands, once smooth, grew calloused from hauling water, scrubbing clothes, tending vegetables. Her back ached from bending over the washboard. Her arms burned from stirring heavy pots of preserves. But each blister, each sore muscle, felt like a small victory, proof she was earning her keep, not accepting charity. One afternoon, while hanging laundry, she heard Emma's laughter from the barn. Real laughter, not the tentative smile she'd managed since the fire. Catherine found her daughter perched on a hay bale while Sam showed her how to oil leather harnesses. His large hands guided her small ones, patient with her clumsy attempts. "Like this?" Emma asked, rubbing the oil into the leather with intense concentration. "That's right," Sam said. "Keep it supple, it'll last longer." "My papa used to let me help with his tools," Emma said quietly. It was the first time she'd mentioned James since the fire. "He said I was his best helper." Sam's hands stilled for a moment. "Bet you were," he said simply. "You're doing fine work here, too." Catherine's throat tightened. She slipped away before they noticed her, not wanting to intrude on the moment. Sam might be a man of few words, but he had an instinct for what Emma needed. Quiet acceptance, useful work, the dignity of being treated as capable rather than fragile. The storm came 3 days later, rolling across the prairie like a living thing. Catherine had seen storms before, but nothing like this. The sky turned green-black, wind howling like a banshee. Lightning split the air with violent cracks that made Emma whimper and press close to her mother. Sam battled to secure everything he could, shuttering windows, herding animals to shelter, lashing down anything that might blow away. Catherine helped where she could, but the wind nearly knocked her flat. He finally pushed her toward the cabin, shouting over the gale. "Inside, both of you!" She wanted to protest, to help, but Emma was terrified. Catherine bundled her daughter inside just as the rain hit, falling in sheets so thick she couldn't see the barn 20 feet away. The cabin shuddered under the wind's assault, timbers creaking ominously. Sam burst through the door moments later, soaked to the skin. Water streamed from his hat, his clothes. He shed the wet outer layers by the door, movements quick and efficient. "It'll pass," he said, though Catherine heard the uncertainty beneath the words. Prairie storms could spawn tornadoes, flatten buildings, kill livestock and people alike. They huddled by the stove, listening to the storm's fury. The roof leaked in 2 places, problems to fix when the weather cleared. If the weather cleared, if the cabin survived. Catherine found herself praying wordlessly, arms around Emma, acutely aware of how fragile their shelter was against nature's violence. Then Sam was there, spreading an oilcloth over them to block the dripping water. He sat close, not quite touching, but near enough that she felt his solid presence. Emma, sandwiched between the 2 adults, gradually stopped shaking. "Tell us a story," Catherine said impulsively, "about when you were young." Sam looked surprised, almost alarmed. He wasn't a storyteller, wasn't given to sharing personal history. But Emma turned pleading eyes on him, and something in his expression shifted. "Not much for stories," he said slowly. "But there was this horse once, when I was about Emma's age. Wild Mustang, black as midnight. Everyone said he couldn't be broke." His voice was rusty with disuse, but as he continued, it smoothed out. He told them about the horse, about patience and trust, about the day the Mustang finally accepted a saddle. It wasn't a fancy story, no dramatic flourishes or exciting climax, just a boy and a horse and the slow building of understanding. But Emma hung on every word, and Catherine found herself watching Sam's face, seeing the ghost of the boy he'd been in the man's weathered features. The storm passed near midnight, leaving eerie quiet in its wake. Sam ventured out to check the damage, returning with relief evident in his posture. "Lost some shingles, fences down in places, nothing that can't be fixed." They were lucky. In the morning, they'd learned that the Jennings farm 5 miles north had lost their barn, and old Mr. Crenshaw's prize bull had been killed by lightning. The tornado had passed a mile to the east, carving a path of destruction that missed them by providence or chance. Working together to repair the storm damage, Catherine noticed a shift in their dynamic. The crisis had broken down some invisible barrier. Sam still didn't talk much, but his silence felt companionable now rather than distant. When their hands accidentally touched passing tools or materials, he didn't flinch away. When Emma chattered at him over dinner, he listened with genuine attention. One evening, as Catherine struggled to haul water for the evening washing, she found Sam beside her, without a word. He took the heavy bucket from her hands. But instead of carrying it himself, he showed her a better grip, a way to use her legs more than her back. Then he picked up the second bucket, and they walked together, sharing the load. It became their pattern, not Sam taking over her work, but sharing it. They milked the cow together in the gray dawn, her hands and his working in rhythm. They weeded the garden side by side, comfortable in shared silence. When she cooked, he hauled water and wood without being asked. When he mended harnesses, she held the pieces steady. The day Catherine tried to patch the roof herself, determined to fix what the storm had damaged, Sam found her perched precariously on a ladder. His face went pale, and for the first time, she heard real anger in his voice. "Get down," he ordered. "Now." "I can do this," she protested. "I've watched you." "Get down." He steadied the ladder with hands that shook slightly. "You fall, break your neck. What happens to Emma?" The question stopped her cold. She climbed down, ashamed and defensive. "I'm trying to help. Plenty of ways to help without killing yourself." His anger was already fading, replaced by something that looked like fear. "Just ask next time. We'll do it together." That "we" again. Casual but weighted with meaning. Catherine nodded, throat tight. She'd been alone so long, even before James died, that accepting help felt like admitting weakness. But Sam offered partnership, not charity, a sharing of burdens that dignified rather than diminished. When the roof was properly patched, together, they sat on the porch steps, sharing water from the same dipper. The sun was setting, painting the grasslands gold and scarlet. Emma played with Duke in the yard, her laughter bright as bird song. "Beautiful country," Catherine said softly. "Has its moments." Sam agreed. She glanced at him. This taciturn man who'd opened his home to strangers, who protected without possessing, who gave without taking. The sunset light softened his weathered features, and she saw again the kindness that lived beneath the granite exterior. "Thank you," she said. "For the roof, for everything." He shrugged, uncomfortable with gratitude as always. "Needed doing?" But his hand rested on the step near hers, and when her fingers accidentally brushed his, he didn't pull away. They sat in companionable silence, watching Emma play, feeling the peace of evening settle over the land. For the first time since the fire, Catherine felt something besides fear and grief and determination. She felt the possibility of contentment, of building something new from the ashes of what was lost. The storm had tested their little household and found it strong enough to endure whatever came next. Morrison's threats, the town's disapproval, the uncertain future. They would face it as they'd faced the storm. Together. The riders came at dawn, their horses' hooves drumming against the hard-packed earth. Catherine woke to Duke's frantic barking and Sam's quick movements as he reached for his rifle. Through the window, she counted 3 figures silhouetted against the rising sun, the same 3 who had burned her home, returned despite Morrison's claims of dismissing them. "Stay inside," Sam ordered, checking his ammunition. "Keep Emma down." But Catherine had lived through one fire already. She wouldn't cower while he faced danger alone. "Emma," she said firmly, "get under the bed. Don't come out until I say—" Her daughter's eyes were wide with remembered terror, but she obeyed. Catherine grabbed the shotgun Sam kept by the door. He'd taught her to use it during their quiet afternoons, his hand steady on hers as he showed her how to aim, how to brace for the recoil. "Catherine," Sam's voice held warning. "I'm not hiding," she said. "Not this time." Something flickered in his eyes. Respect, perhaps, or resignation. He nodded once, then stepped onto the porch. Catherine positioned herself by the window, shotgun ready. The 3 men had spread out in a half-circle facing the cabin. Harlan, the scarred leader, sat his horse with arrogant confidence. His companions, the wiry man and the younger one who'd shown reluctance before, flanked him. "McKean," Harlan called. "Send out the woman. Morrison's changed his mind about letting her stay." Sam stood relaxed on the porch, rifle held loosely but ready. He didn't respond. just waited with that stillness Catherine had come to recognize as his most dangerous mood. "Come now," Harlan continued. "No need for bloodshed. She's nothing to you. Just some stray you picked up. Why die for another man's widow?" Still, Sam said nothing. The silence stretched, broken only by Duke's low growls from inside. The younger gunman shifted nervously. "Harlan, maybe we should—" "Shut up," Harlan snapped. He focused on Sam again. "Last chance. McKean. The woman and girl come with us, peaceful-like, or we take them over your dead body." Sam's response was to shift his rifle slightly, the movement minimal but meaningful. The morning sun caught the barrel, sending a flash of light across the yard. Harlan's face darkened. So be it. His hand moved toward his gun. What happened next occurred with shocking speed. Sam's rifle cracked once. Harlan's gun went spinning from his hand before he'd cleared leather. The scarred man cursed, clutching his bleeding fingers. The wiry man went for his weapon. Catherine didn't think, just acted. The shotgun boomed, kicking hard against her shoulder. Her shot went wide but close enough to make the man's horse rear, spoiling his aim. His shot went wild, splintering wood from the porch rail. Sam fired again, this time catching the wiry man's shoulder. The gunman dropped his weapon, slumping forward in his saddle. The younger man hadn't even drawn. His hands were high, face pale. "I'm not shooting," he yelled. "I'm done with this." For a moment, everything froze. Harlan cradled his mangled hand, blood dripping onto his saddle. His companion moaned, clutching his shoulder. The young one sat rigid, hands still raised. Then Sam spoke, his voice carrying clearly in the morning air. "Take your wounded and go. Don't come back." "This isn't over," Harlan managed through gritted teeth. "Morrison owns this county. You can't—" "I can," Sam interrupted. "And I will. You come here again. I won't aim for your gun hand." The threat was delivered without heat, a simple statement of fact that carried more weight than any shouted rage. Catherine watched from the window as the younger gunman helped his wounded companions, the three of them riding away considerably less cocky than they'd arrived. Only when they were specks on the horizon did Sam lower his rifle. He turned to find Catherine in the doorway, shotgun still in her hands. For a long moment, they looked at each other. "You could have been killed," he said finally. "So could you. That's different." "No," Catherine said firmly. "It's not. This is my fight too, my home now. You don't face it alone." His expression underwent several changes. Surprise, something that might have been pride, and finally, a warmth that transformed his weathered features. He reached out, gently taking the shotgun from her trembling hands. "You did good," he said quietly. "That shot spooked them good." Catherine laughed, surprising herself. The sound had a hysterical edge. "I was aiming for his chest." The corner of Sam's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Don't tell them that." Emma's voice came from inside, small and frightened. "Mama, is it safe?" Catherine rushed to her daughter, gathering her close. "Yes, sweetheart. It's safe. They're gone." Over Emma's head, she met Sam's eyes. They both knew it wasn't over. Morrison wouldn't let this challenge go unanswered, but for now, they were safe. They'd stood together and prevailed. The rest of the day passed in strange normalcy. Sam repaired the damaged porch rail. Catherine went about her chores with hands that only shook a little. Emma stayed close to Duke, finding comfort in the dog's steady presence. But they all felt it. The sense of a corner turned, a line crossed. That evening, as Catherine served supper, she noticed Sam favoring his left arm. "You're hurt," she said, alarmed. "It's nothing. Splinter from the porch rail." But when she insisted on looking, she found an ugly gash where a wood fragment had torn through his shirt. "This needs cleaning," she said, gathering her medical supplies. He submitted to her ministrations with unusual patience. As she cleaned the wound, she was acutely aware of his nearness, the warmth of his skin under her fingers. He smelled of leather and gunpowder and honest sweat. "Could have been worse," she murmured, dabbing iodine on the cut. "Has been worse." he replied. She glanced up, finding his eyes on her face rather than his injured arm. Other fights? Some. He was quiet a moment. Never had anyone standing with me before, though the simple statement made her throat tight. She focused on bandaging his arm, but her hands trembled slightly. When she finished, neither of them moved immediately. They were close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his gray eyes, could feel his breath stir her hair. "Catherine," he said, voice rougher than usual. "Mama?" Emma's call from the table broke the moment. "I'm hungry." Catherine stepped back, face warm. "Coming, sweetheart?" But something had shifted between them. Some invisible barrier weakened. Through dinner, she was aware of every glance, every accidental touch as they passed dishes. Sam seemed equally affected, though he hid it better behind his usual taciturn manner. After Emma was asleep, Catherine found herself restless. She stepped onto the porch, finding Sam already there, keeping watch. The night was clear, stars brilliant in the vast sky. "They'll be back," she said, not a question. "Probably." He glanced at her. "Morrison won't let his men get bested without answer. What will we do? We'll be ready." That "we" again, natural as breathing now. Catherine wrapped her shawl tighter, moving to stand beside him. "I was terrified," she admitted. "When I saw them coming, I thought we'd lose everything again. But we didn't. No." She looked up at him. "Because of you. Because of us," he corrected. "That shot of yours made the difference, gave me the time I needed." They stood in comfortable silence, shoulders almost touching. Inside, Duke whined softly in his sleep. The night sounds of the prairie surrounded them. Distant coyotes, the whisper of wind in grass, the creak of the windmill. "My husband was a good man," Catherine said suddenly. "But he was a dreamer." Always planning for tomorrow, never quite managing today. When trouble came, he'd talk about what we'd do, how we'd handle it, but talk was all it ever was. She felt rather than saw Sam's attention sharpen. "I loved him," she continued, "but I was alone even when he was alive, making the decisions, holding things together while he dreamed." She paused, searching for words. "Today, for the first time in so long, I didn't feel alone." Sam was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't respond. Then, known that feeling, being alone even with people around. Mary tried, but she was sick so much, had to be strong for her. After she died, he shrugged, got used to the silence. "Do you miss it?" Catherine asked softly. "The silence? We've disrupted your life, brought trouble to your door." He turned to look at her fully then, his expression serious. "No," he said simply. "Don't miss it at all." The weight of what lay unspoken between them pressed against Catherine's chest. But now wasn't the time. Not with danger circling, not with her daughter sleeping just inside. Still, she allowed herself to lean slightly, just enough that her shoulder touched his. He didn't pull away. "Whatever comes," she said, "we'll face it. Together." He agreed. They stood watch together until the moon rose high. Then Sam insisted she get some rest. But sleep came slowly. Catherine lay beside Emma, listening to Sam's quiet footsteps on the porch, and thought about partnership forged in crisis, about a man who spoke with actions rather than dreams, about the way "we" could become the strongest word in any language. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Morrison wouldn't accept this defeat quietly. But tonight, they'd proven something to themselves and each other. They were no longer strangers thrown together by circumstance. They were partners, united by choice and strengthened by trial. The thought warmed her more than any blanket, carrying her finally into sleep while her defender kept watch through the night. The morning started like any other, with Sam already at work when Catherine emerged from the cabin. But something was different. A basket sat on the porch, covered with a checkered cloth. Catherine lifted the covering to find fresh bread, a jar of preserves, and a note in careful script. "For the family at McKean Ranch, Sarah Patterson." Catherine stared at the gift, remembering her harsh words to Mrs. Patterson weeks ago. That the woman would extend this kindness after being turned away spoke of a generous heart. "What's that?" Emma asked, Duke at her heels as always. "A gift from a neighbor," Catherine said, wonder in her voice. "Fresh bread for breakfast." Sam appeared from the barn, taking in the basket with raised eyebrows. Catherine showed him the note, and something shifted in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, that anyone in town would acknowledge them as a family. The bread was still warm, filling the cabin with its yeasty scent. As they ate breakfast together, Catherine noticed how natural it felt now, the three of them around the small table, sharing a meal in companionable quiet. When had they stopped being strangers thrown together by tragedy and become this? "Mama," Emma said suddenly, her young voice cutting through Catherine's thoughts, "are we going to stay here forever?" The question hung in the air. Catherine glanced at Sam, but his face revealed nothing as he studied his coffee. "I don't know, sweetheart," Catherine answered honestly. "Would you like to stay?" Emma nodded emphatically. "I like it here. I like Duke and the chickens and Sam teaching me about horses." She paused, then added in a smaller voice, "I don't want to leave again." Catherine's heart clenched. Her daughter had lost too much already. Her father, her home, her sense of safety. The thought of uprooting her again, even if propriety demanded it, seemed cruel. "We'll see," Catherine said softly, though she caught Sam's quick glance at her words. Later that morning, as Catherine worked in the garden, she heard horses approaching. Her body tensed, remembering the last visitors. But these riders came openly, slowly. Sam emerged from the barn, rifle in hand but not raised. 3 women from town dismounted: Sarah Patterson, Doc Summers' wife Martha, and surprisingly, Mrs. Henderson from the dress shop. They looked uncomfortable but determined. "Mrs. Mills," Sarah Patterson began, twisting her hands. "I owe you an apology. What I said before, it wasn't Christian of me." Catherine set down her hoe, wiping dirty hands on her apron. "You spoke your mind. I respect honesty, but not self-righteousness," Martha Summers interjected, her practical face kind. "Sarah told us what you said, about where we all were when you needed help. Made us think." Mrs. Henderson, who had so coldly rejected Catherine's request for work, stepped forward. "I was wrong," she said simply. "My own mother was a widow. I know how hard I let fear of gossip override compassion. I'm ashamed." Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. These women, with their proper reputations and established places in the community, had come to her. "Thank you," she managed. "There's more," Sarah said, gathering courage. "There's to be a church social next Sunday. That is, we hope you'll come, all of you." The invitation was clearly hard won, probably debated among the church ladies at length. Catherine glanced toward Sam, who stood silent and watchful by the barn. "That's kind," Catherine said carefully, "but I wouldn't want to cause discord." "You won't," Martha said firmly. "Oh, some will talk. They always do, but most folks are starting to see the truth of things. Sam McKean's a good man, and you're a respectable woman in hard circumstances. Anyone with eyes can see nothing improper is happening here. Besides," Mrs. Henderson added with unexpected tartness, "half the gossips in town have skeletons in their own closets. Let them cast the first stone, I say." The women stayed for tea, awkward at first but warming as Emma charmed them with her bright chatter and careful manners. Sam kept his distance, but Catherine caught him watching from the barn door, something almost like wonder on his face. After they left, Catherine found him repairing a harness. "They invited us to the social," she said. "Heard? Will you go?" His hand stilled. "Church folk don't want me there. They specifically said all of us. Your reputation—" "My reputation is already in tatters," Catherine interrupted. "But if we keep hiding, it'll never improve. Emma needs to know community, needs friends her own age. And you—" She hesitated, then plunged on. "You deserve to be part of the world again, not exiled because you're different." He looked at her then, really looked, and she saw the loneliness he carried like a weight. "Been alone a long time," he said quietly. "Too long," she replied. "Come with us, please." That evening, as they settled into their routine, Sam reading by lamplight while Catherine mended and Emma played with Duke, the child asked again, "Are we a family?" The question, more direct than mornings, made both adults freeze. Emma looked between them with innocent curiosity. "Families come in different forms," Catherine said carefully. "But we live together and eat together and take care of each other." Emma persisted. "That's what families do." "Yes," Sam said suddenly, his deep voice sure. "We're a family." Emma beamed, satisfied, and returned to her play. But Catherine felt the words resonate through her chest. Sam had claimed them, simply and completely. When she dared meet his eyes, she found him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. That night, after Emma was asleep, Catherine stepped outside to find Sam on the porch as usual. But instead of standing guard, he sat on the steps, a rare moment of rest. She settled beside him, closer than propriety allowed. But propriety had long since ceased to matter. "You meant it," she said. "What you told Emma. Don't say things I don't mean." "I know." She twisted her hands in her lap. "James used to make promises easily, grand words about the future, about what we'd have someday. You just quietly make things true. Catherine," her name in his voice made her shiver. "I'm not asking for anything," she said quickly. "I know this arrangement is, we're here because you're kind, not because—" "Kind?" He turned to face her fully. "You think I'm being kind, aren't you?" "No." The word was flat, definite. "Kind would be sending you to that widow's home in Dodge. Kind would be finding you other circumstances. This—" He gestured between them. "This is selfish." Her breath caught. "Selfish?" "I want you here," he said simply. "You and Emma both. House feels right with you in it. Land feels right with you on it. That's not kindness. Catherine, that's me being selfish enough to keep you close when I should let you go." The words, more than he'd ever said at once about feelings, hung between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Catherine felt her heart racing, possibility and fear warring in her chest. "What if I don't want to go?" she whispered. His hand moved on the step, covering hers. His palm was rough, warm, steady. "Then stay. The town is starting to come around. Morrison is my problem to handle. People will always talk. Let them." His fingers intertwined with hers. "I've been living my life by other people's rules, keeping distance, staying quiet. Didn't make them accept me, just made me alone. You changed that." Catherine turned her hand palm up, properly holding his. "You changed things for us too, gave us safety, home, hope." "Family," he said, echoing Emma's word. "Yes," Catherine agreed. "Family." They sat in the deepening twilight, hands clasped, watching stars emerge in the vast prairie sky. No more words were needed. They'd built something together, not quickly, not easily, but solidly. Trust earned through action, affection grown from respect, partnership forged in daily choices. "The social," Catherine said eventually. "You'll come." He squeezed her hand. "I'll come." It was a small promise, but Catherine heard the larger commitment beneath it. He'd step out of his comfortable isolation, face the town's judgment, claim his place in the community, not for himself, but for them, for the family they were becoming. Inside, Emma murmured in her sleep. Duke's tail thumped against the floor. The night sounds of the prairie wrapped around them, familiar now, no longer threatening. Home sounds. "We should go in," Catherine said, though she made no move to rise. "Soon," Sam agreed, equally still. They sat a while longer, hands joined, hearts finally admitting what their actions had long declared. Tomorrow would bring the social, the town's scrutiny, decisions about the future. But tonight, They had this, the quiet understanding that they'd chosen each other, chosen to build something lasting from the ashes of their separate losses. When they finally rose and went inside, Sam to his bedroll, Catherine to lie beside Emma, the warmth of his hand lingered on hers. Family, she thought, testing the word. Yes, that's what they'd become. Not through blood or even law, but through choice, through daily acts of care and courage. And maybe, just maybe, through something deeper that neither was quite ready to name, but both were beginning to trust. The church social arrived with unseasonable heat, the kind that made the prairies shimmer like water. Catherine dressed Emma in her best, a simple frock Mrs. Henderson had sent over, along with fabric for Catherine to make herself something proper. As she pinned up her hair, her hands trembled slightly. This was their first real step into the community as, what, a family? The question that had seemed settled in their hearts remained complicated in the eyes of the law and society. Sam emerged from the barn transformed. He'd trimmed his hair, shaved carefully, and wore his good shirt, the one Catherine had mended with tiny, careful stitches. He looked uncomfortable but determined, tugging at his collar like a boy in Sunday clothes. "You look nice," Emma told him solemnly, and something in his face softened. "You too, little one," he replied, offering his arm to Catherine with formal courtesy that made her heart flutter. The ride to town felt both too long and too short. Other families passed them on the road, some nodding greeting, others averting their eyes. Catherine kept her chin high, drawing strength from Sam's solid presence beside her on the wagon seat. The church grounds buzzed with activity, tables laden with food, children running between the adults, the general chaos of community gathering. As their wagon drew to a halt, Catherine felt the weight of dozens of eyes turning their way. Conversations faltered. Even the children seemed to pause in their play. Then Sarah Patterson bustled forward, brave as a general leading a charge. "Catherine, Mr. McKean, so glad you could come. Emma, there are children your age by the oak tree. Why don't you join them?" Emma looked to her mother uncertainly. New children. New chances for rejection or acceptance. Catherine squeezed her shoulder encouragingly and watched her daughter walk toward the group with Duke-learned bravery. "Come." Martha Summers appeared at Catherine's elbow. "The ladies are setting out the food. Many hands make light work." It was an olive branch, an inclusion. Catherine accepted it gratefully, even as she felt Sam tense beside her. The men had congregated near the church steps, and none had acknowledged him. "Go on," she murmured to him. "I'll be fine." He hesitated, then moved toward the men with the same steady gait he used approaching a spooked horse. Catherine watched him go, heart in her throat, before following Martha to the food tables. The work of setting out dishes, arranging plates, and fussing over placement gave the women something to focus on besides the awkwardness. Gradually, conversation resumed. Not everyone was warm. Several women kept their distance, but enough were kind that Catherine began to relax fractionally. "Your preserves," Abigail Henley said, sampling a jar Catherine had contributed. "These are excellent. My mother used to add mint like this." Small talk, recipe exchanges, complaints about the heat, normal conversation that included rather than excluded. Catherine found herself almost enjoying it until she heard raised voices from where the men gathered. "Brings his kept woman to church socials now?" The voice belonged to Carl Morrison, Thomas Morrison's eldest son. "What's next? McKean? Going to parade her at the harvest dance?" Catherine started forward, but Martha caught her arm. "No," she said quietly. "Let him handle it." Sam stood perfectly still amid the group of men. That dangerous stillness Catherine recognized. But it was Reverend Mills, no relation to Catherine's late husband, who spoke up. "That's enough. Carl, this is a church gathering. All are welcome who come in peace." "Peace?" Carl spat. "This man harbors the woman who owes my father. I owe your father nothing?" Catherine said clearly, unable to stay silent. She walked to Sam's side, head high. "My husband owed him nothing. The debt your father claims was false, and the men he sent to collect it were criminals who would have murdered a woman and child. You have no proof. I have the proof of my own eyes." Doc Summers interrupted, his aged voice carrying authority. "I treated Mrs. Mills and her daughter after the fire. What was done to them was unconscionable. And I have the proof of 3 men who attacked this ranch," Sam added, his voice low, but carrying, "men who named your father as their employer." Carl's face flushed ugly red. "You can't prove—" "Enough!" Reverend Mills raised his hand. "This is neither the time nor place. We're here to celebrate community, not air grievances." An uncomfortable silence fell. Then old Henry Walsh, a rancher who'd been in the county longer than most, cleared his throat. "Sam McKean's been a good neighbor for years. Quiet, keeps to himself, but honest in his dealings. If he says the woman and child needed protection, I believe him." "As do I," said another voice. Then another. "Not all the men, not even most, but enough. A tide turning, perhaps." Carl Morrison looked around, finding less support than expected. "This isn't over," he said, unconsciously echoing his father's words. Then he stormed off, taking 2 cronies with him. The social resumed awkwardly. Catherine stayed close to Sam, drawing strength from his presence. Emma, she was relieved to see, had been accepted by the other children and was teaching them a game Duke had inspired. "We should go," Sam said quietly as the afternoon wore on. "Made our point." "No," Catherine said firmly. "We stay. We eat. We let Emma play. We show them we belong here as much as anyone." He studied her face, then nodded. They stayed. As the sun lowered, dancing began. Catherine watched couples move to the fiddler's tune, remembering other socials, other times when James had swung her around with more enthusiasm than skill. The memory no longer hurt as it once had. "Would you—" Sam gestured awkwardly toward the dancers. "That is, if you want—" Catherine stared. Sam McKean asking her to dance? In public? The significance of it, the claim it represented, made her breath catch. "Yes," she said softly. He led her to the dance area, ignoring the whispers that followed. His hand on her waist was proper, careful, but warm through her dress. They moved together slowly, finding their rhythm. He danced like he did everything else, with quiet competence and focused attention. "People are staring," Catherine murmured. "Let them," he replied, echoing their conversation from the porch. Tired of hiding. As they turned, Catherine saw Emma watching them with bright eyes, saw Sarah Patterson nodding approval, saw even some of the holdouts looking thoughtful. This was how change happened. Not all at once, but in small acts of courage. When the dance ended, Reverend Mills approached them. "Mrs. Mills, Mr. McKean. Might I have a word?" They followed him to a quiet corner. The Reverend was a thin man with kind eyes and the weight of shepherding a fractious flock on his shoulders. "I'll speak plainly," he said. "Your situation is irregular. It causes talk, division. Some in my congregation demand I denounce it." Catherine's heart sank, but the Reverend continued. "However, I see something else. I see a man who protected the vulnerable. I see a woman trying to rebuild after tragedy. I see a child who needs stability." He paused. "Have you considered making your arrangement official?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Catherine felt heat rise to her cheeks. Beside her, Sam had gone very still. "Reverend," Catherine began, but Sam interrupted. "Yes," he said simply. "Been considering it?" Catherine turned to stare at him. He met her gaze steadily. "But the decision isn't mine alone," he continued, still looking at Catherine. "Woman's got a say in her own future." The Reverend cleared his throat. "Well, should you decide, I'd be honored to perform the service. Something simple, dignified. It would silence the worst of the talk and give you legal standing against Morrison's claims." He left them alone, moving to tend other parishioners. Catherine couldn't seem to catch her breath. "Sam," Not here, he said quietly. Not with half the town watching. But we need to talk. Tonight. The ride home passed in charged silence. Emma chattered about her new friends, oblivious to the tension between the adults. As their cabin came into view in the gathering dusk, Catherine felt as if she stood on the edge of a precipice after Emma was settled in bed, exhausted from the day's excitements. Catherine found Sam on the porch, but instead of his usual watchful stance, he sat on the steps, a spot beside him, clearly waiting for her. She sat, acutely aware of every inch between them. "The Reverend's suggestion," she began. "Wasn't a suggestion," Sam said. "Was a solution. To Morrison, to the town, to—" He stopped, took a breath. "But that's not why I said yes to considering it." "No." He turned to face her fully. In the dim light, his eyes were almost black. "I'm not James Mills," he said. "Don't have pretty words or grand dreams. Can't promise you an easy life or riches, but I can promise this. My hands will always work for you and Emma. My gun will always stand between you and harm. My home will always be yours." "Sam," Catherine's voice broke. "And my heart," he continued, each word pulled from deep within, "already belongs to you both. Has for weeks now, maybe since that first night when you stood in my yard, all smoke and courage and fierce love for your girl." Tears ran down Catherine's cheeks. "I don't need pretty words," she whispered. "I need truth. I need steadiness. I need someone who shows love in actions, not just promises." "Is that a yes?" His voice held rare uncertainty. "Yes," Catherine said, firm and clear. "Yes to marriage. Yes to family. Yes to building something real and lasting from what we've already begun." His hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. "Tomorrow?" he asked. "Don't see a reason to wait. Let the town keep talking." "Tomorrow," she agreed. They sat quietly, hands clasped, hearts full. The prairie wind whispered around them, carrying the scent of coming rain. Inside, Emma sighed in her sleep, safe and protected. Duke's tail thumped once against the floorboards. "I will," Sam said suddenly. Catherine looked at him questioningly. "At the service tomorrow, when the Reverend asks, 'Want you to know?' Those won't be empty words. I will means I will work every day to be worthy of the trust you're placing in me. I will means I'll love that little girl like my own. I will means you'll never face another fire, another threat, another sorrow alone." Catherine lifted their joined hands, pressing her lips to his scarred knuckles. "And when I say it, I'll mean that I'll stand beside you against whatever comes. I'll make this house a true home. I'll teach Emma to be proud of the man who chose to be her father." "Father," Sam repeated, wonder in his voice. "Never thought." "Neither did I," Catherine admitted. "But here we are." Here they were indeed, two people scarred by loss, a child needing security, a town slowly accepting what it first rejected. Tomorrow would bring a simple ceremony, vows exchanged, a family made official in the eyes of law and God. But tonight, in the quiet understanding between them, in the promises made not with flourishes but with quiet certainty, they were already bound. "Storm coming," Sam observed, noting the shift in the wind. "We'll weather it," Catherine replied, and they both knew she meant more than rain. They sat until the first drops fell, then went inside together. Tomorrow, Catherine would pack away Mary's dress she'd been wearing and put on her own. Tomorrow, Sam would speak his longest sentences in public, making vows that would echo in his actions for years to come. Tomorrow, Emma would gain a father who'd already proven himself in all the ways that mattered. But tonight, they were already home, already family, already building something stronger than fire could burn or men could threaten. Love built not on passion's flash, but on steady choice, daily kindness, and the profound trust between two people who knew how to survive and had chosen to live. The storm broke overhead, rain drumming on the roof Sam had patched with Catherine's help. Inside, safe and dry, a family slept, not bound by blood, but by something stronger. The choice to stand together against whatever the prairie might bring. In the morning, there would be a wedding. But in their hearts, the marriage had already begun the night a silent man cut a woman's bonds and led her home. Thank you for listening to this Wild West love story. Where are you enjoying this tale from? Leave a comment below and let's connect. Don't forget to subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts about Catherine and Sam's journey. Your support means everything.